Part. This is the fourth step workshop. It's open to anyone who'd like to learn how to do inventory as prescribed in the big book by Bill W. And it's a 4-week course. Doesn't matter when you come in. Tonight's the second week of the 4 weeks. The first night we do third step and resentment. Second night tonight we do the third step and fear. The third week we do the third step and harms done to others. We look at our sexual behavior in the past and the present and do our sexual inventory. And the fourth week is just a review of everything and going over the basic principles that underline the inventory. Now, to me, Bill W. describes it very well in the book. He says that self is what has defeated us. Right? At that time, they used to call it self. Now we call it ego, let's say. Okay? And that selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of the troubles. And that any life run on self-will is not going to be successful. It's not going to work. So basically what he's saying there, he does all the work for us. He just identifies the root of the problem, which is your sense of self. Now, and that's really truly what it is. It's like a sense of self. There's a feeling there. There's a lot of thoughts that refer back to it, but there's a sense that you're somebody all the time. And this somebody seems to be living in a sequence of time, right? As past, present, and future. And in this timeline of this somebody, it tends to sort of override the present most of the time and keep in high regard the past and the future. Now, if you really look at it in some real simplistic terms, like we said last week, there's a simple way of finding out the intention of the mind, and it's just to look at some of the ways it works. And a simple way to explain it is if you're feeling really good today, sooner or later in the day, probably very soon, you're going to start having thoughts that this isn't going to last, that something's going to happen, or you're going to have thoughts that you're going to try to have to control it so it will keep going, which implies that you have a fear that it's not going to last anyway. And yet in the same sequence of events, maybe a day later, maybe you're having a bad day, your mind, so let's just say you're feeling good, the mind tells you it's not going to last, but when you're feeling bad, your mind usually tells you it's going to last forever. Right? Now, to me, that's a pretty damn good indication of its intention, that thing that's talking to you in your head. Because really, one is just an experience just like the other. One you call a happy experience, the other one you call a bad experience. But how does the mind react to them? It reacts totally differently. How it reacts to the happy one is that it's going to have to try to control it and manage it, or it's going to lose it, and it really believes it's going to lose it. And yet how it reacts to the bad one is like it stretches it out like a piece of elastic, and it basically starts telling you this is probably going to last forever. Now, if you would just see that in your own experience, there's the intention of your mind. It's as simple as that. And so you start seeing what you're dealing with. To me, it's almost like a weatherman. Every day I wake up, and the weatherman tells me how it's going to be today. Right? And it usually just takes its backlog of old weather reports and makes another one up. It tells me this is how it's going to be. And while I'm sitting there, I believe it usually. And so if it tells me it's going to rain, I start putting on my rain gear, and I don't even look out the window. I just believe it. And so all my wardrobes, all my closets are full of raincoats because I'm constantly thinking it's going to rain. And basically that's the attitude that lingers, and there's that sense of self. The sense of self, see how much times you try to control things, which only imply that you're in fear. Everything that you do, there's a reason for it underneath it. It's not just a random occurrence. Your response to it shows a pattern. So if you're trying to exert control, you're usually underneath that desire to control is a fear that you're not going to get what you want, or you're going to lose what you have. So if you're in control or trying to control all the time, guess what? The thing that's motivating that control is there all the time. You may not be feeling it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. See? For you to be dead, you don't need to feel it. For you to be small, you don't need to feel what's making you small all the time. Basically how it keeps you small is that you forget it. You're not aware of the fear that's surrounding you all the time. you're aware of when the siren comes behind you and the lights come on, then maybe the fear gets excited. But what it drops back to is just a level of fear that we seem to live in. You know? So I think he's really hitting a number when he talks about that self is what has defeated us. And when you look at fear, it's really simple, that fear is an effect of something else. And Bill W. would say that fear is an effect of self-will, pretty much. It says, didn't self-reliance fail us? So we attempted to control situations with our will, right? And the fact is it didn't work. So it's failed us, the self-will. And every time that you exert it, deep down in you, now you know it's probably not going to work again, right? So the whole time you're exerting will, you've got this little fear there that's probably not going to happen. So instead of, let's say, holding something, you end up choking it, you know, because the control becomes so paramount because you're so afraid. So you look at the effects of fear, and you may not like them. You may not like that you're worrying all the time, that you feel anxiety, that you're constantly in the future, all like this and all like that. And, you know, those things are drags, and you like to get rid of those things, right? You'd rather be more in the moment, and you'd rather not have anxiety, and I wish I didn't have to worry so much. So one of the first steps to sort of get out of that is to take your will in your life and turn it over to something greater than yourself, right? And while relying on that, life will seem to change, and you will be treated differently, and you'll be reconditioned. Instead of being in fear, you'll now be in faith. And there's a process that happens, right? It takes a while sometimes. But if you take it back even farther and see what's causing you to be in fear is the ideas you have about yourself, the ideas you have about life, right? All your old belief systems. Like it says in the book, you know, the results are not going to be anything until you let go of all your old ideas. These old ideas, most of them are about you. Right? So you're carrying this whole, like, you've got this sense of self. You've got an image of yourself. And let's say in most alcoholics, the image is sort of on the negative side. Somehow or another, you think you're marred, something's wrong with you. You're guilty before you do anything, right? 99 people say something great about you. One person says something bad about you, and you dwell on that one thing that person said more than the 99 things, you know? You're basically looking for verification about how you feel about yourself. This sense of self is the root of your fear. That's it. That is the cause of it. Self is the cause of it. When you get out of yourself, even if it's for a moment, there's one great relief in that moment. There's no fear in it. There isn't. If you go inside right now and you took a couple of deep breaths and you dropped out of your head, let's say you went into your heart, one of the great feelings you'd have is the absence of fear. It wouldn't be there, you know? And so why not see if you can stretch out those moments? Why is it that it's an abnormal experience during your day, and the rest of the day you're wrapped up in all the fear and dealing with it and trying to manage it better? See, because the ego, in a sense, if you're living as an ego, and you believe it's you, the possibility for happiness, joy, and freedom is going to be quite limited, because the ego lives in the future, right? Obviously. You dwell a lot about it, don't you? Well, most of your thoughts are about the future. Aren't they? Yes, no? That's where the ego dwells. It dwells in time, right? The past is projected into a future. And the thing is, it tries to deny the present, but the present is real, so it can't deny it, basically, but it just rides over it very quickly most of the time. So most of the time, all the time, you're here right now. You can't be anywhere else. But most of the time, you aren't here right now. You're in the time, right? You're either dwelling back on something that's happened and having a resentment or a regret, or you're thinking about a future that's scary because you have no control over it, right? And there's an unknown quality there. And that unknown quality is just enough to let a huge amount of fear come in all the time, because you don't know what's going to happen. Right? So here you are in this moment, and everything's fine, but because of the sense of a future, and that you don't have any control over it, and you don't know how it's going to be, that's what happens. That's what rains on your parade every day. No matter how beautiful it is, the mind will, on the outskirts of the mind, there will be a certain tension or a sense of contraction in a way because it's afraid what's going to happen later, right? It's going to afraid what's going to happen in a half hour. It's afraid what's going to happen tomorrow. It's afraid what's going to happen in a week. It's afraid what's going to happen in a year. And it can stretch out because it's made an idea called the future that it can fill it with so much fear it's unbelievable. You know? It can't have, see, what it wants to have, this obsession with a future and the sense of controlling it, it can't have that in the present moment. There's no need for it, right? There's no need to be occupied about the future in the present because there isn't any future in the present, right? But so it has to believe that there's a future, so it occupies itself now about something that isn't even happening yet. And usually it occupies in a sort of negative way. It worries, right? It gets concerned. It contracts. And so the contraction happens now. But the contraction is being sort of caused by your obsession with a future that's not even occurring. So you're screwing with yourself right now with an idea called a future. You really are. If something comes in, it's sort of like most of us are so obsessed with it. Let's say God comes to you today and brings a package, something you really need. You won't even hear the door knock because you're not here. You're way in the future with the belief that God's never going to come. I'm never going to have what I need. I'm never going to have what I want. And there it is. It's right at the door. But you can't hear it because you're listening to this. You know, I could be sitting here and let's say I've been feeling like I need attention. Well, this is plenty of attention. But my mind will say, I want attention from a 5'11" blonde who's down at a meeting down the road. So I'll be here saying no to what life has to offer me because I have this idea about how I think it should be. You know? Now, the idea really isn't the paramount strategy. The fact is the ego will use anything to space us out of here. It really will. It doesn't have to be a 5'10" blonde. It could be anything. You know, it could be a thumbnail. It could sit here and look at its nail for an hour and think about, Jesus, is this going to get longer in a week? What am I going to do with this when it gets too long? I may have to go buy some clippers. How am I going to get the money for clippers? Do you know what I mean? And wama, and there you go. And what's happening now, the shame of it is that it's affecting you right now. See? Because you're here right now, but your head isn't. So whatever's going to be offered to you by life is going to happen right now. And you're not home to get it. So to me, that's the real shame. And the real shame is, in this preoccupation of time, being in the past and the future, one thing seems to be lacking, and that's joy and happiness and connection and intimacy. You know what I mean? Intimacy isn't reflecting on when you once had intimacy. That's not intimacy. Joy isn't when you think, when I was 7 years old, taking that water slide. That's not joy. Joy happens now. Now. Joy isn't going to happen in the future. It never will. It never will. Because it will only happen now. Because when the future appears to you, in reality, it will be now. The future is just an idea in our heads. And you can only think about it right now. Basically, you can only do anything right now. You know? But the shame of it is, the egoic mind, because of time, you're not going to have the joy and freedom and happiness that's happening now. Right? Because the ego, even if it's presented with it, it will fixate on, this is probably not going to last. I'm going to lose it. I better grab it now. How can I make this hostage? How can I make it mine? And it will basically strangle the thing that's right here, right now, with the idea of lack and all your other beliefs that will come up and kill the freaking thing. So to me, my only experience in this whole program is the idea of a surrender to the fact that where I find myself as an ego-based person is devastating. And it's power. I'm hopeless there. You know what I mean? The best I can do is to make it a little better. But it's still bondage. Maybe my cell will be, instead of 5 by 8, will be 8 by 11. You know what I mean? I'd much rather have an 8 by 11 cell than a 5 by 8, but you're still in prison. You're still in bondage. This guy talked about resentment yesterday at a meeting. Someone was here too. I really liked the take he had on it because I hadn't been thinking about it. But resentment comes from the Latin word. It means to re-feel, right? To re-feel something. But I used to think that what it meant was to re-feel. Let's say someone said something to me this morning, and then tonight I'm re-feeling it, right? But I got this much larger view of it, and it made no sense to you at all. When I left the meeting, I said, basically you're always just re-feeling the basic same resentment. Maybe the one you had when you were 2, 3, 4 years old, when you felt like you were abandoned or something. Those are the things you're really re-feeling. And that's why you act so inappropriately when something happens right now. Like when someone says, Paul, I don't like you. And then you're crushed, incredibly crushed. And it's way inappropriate to what's actually happened, but you're devastated. What's up with that? You know what I mean? What's up with that? I'm re-feeling something, I guess, from a long time ago. You know what I mean? And my ego is really wanting to avoid that feeling. And so what it does is, instead of actually going to the feeling, it will retaliate or attack, or start thinking about them to get it off of you, Because how much is it? Maybe when I was 3 or 4, if someone said they didn't like me, basically almost killed me, And that's the fear I have about it now. So all these things all my strategies and defenses that I have are basically to protect the ego, not me. That's the funny thing about it. My whole security system is protecting someone else's agenda. It's not mine at all. It's like the ego's using me for transportation, but it's living its life through me. And one of the things I've experienced by doing these inventories is like, when I came in here, I thought I was in a fortress. I really did. I thought I was in a fortress. All my defenses and strategies were meant to keep out everything I didn't want to happen to me that was bad. And I was in there, right? And I had my little counselor, which was my mind, telling me what to do and, fortify this and build a moat here and do this and do that and don't go anywhere near these people. Don't accept intimacy or love. No. And then I realized coming in here that all along I thought I was, and it was a beautiful situation. All along I thought I was in a fortress. I was actually in a prison. And it was one of the greatest prisons of all time because having been convinced I was in a fortress, there was no need for guards. I didn't want to get out. I wanted to stay in. You know what I mean? It didn't cost my mental state any money to oversee me. Because I basically thought I was in a fortress. I thought I was being protected by all this stuff. The advertising campaign of my mind convinced me that it was serving me. And therefore, here I was getting thinner and thinner. I was like on a starvation diet, malnutrition, no visitors really, no intimacy, no connection. But all the while I felt like I was safe. You know what I mean? Man, this is working. My little heart's not getting hurt anymore. Well, my little heart was like shrinking up, And then I come in AA and I realize, wow, this is actually the prison. The ego is actually my jailer, not my counselor. And then when I got that, the steps as a way out seemed very, 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 very attractive. When you're in the fortress, when you think it's the fortress, the steps, why do you want to go outside? What do I want to turn my will, my life over? I'm safe here. What do I want to look at myself? What do I want to help other people? I could be hurt out there. I'm in my fortress. When you realize it's a prison, then you may want to be motivated to leave. And then you see, man, to get out of myself is the way I get out of the prison. And instead of giving all my love and all my desire for freedom to a jailer whose function is to keep me in jail, right? And ask him to give me a plan how to get out, which he's very cruel. He will give me a plan, but he'll tell everyone, so when I break over the fence, they're all waiting for me, You know what I mean? I get shot up. Instead of that, I go around it. I don't give it to my ego, my plans for salvation or whatever it is, or my hope to be free. I don't give it to it. I've been introduced to a mediary. I've been introduced to a higher power, so I can surrender to it. And what it does for me is it brings me back to myself, the you that I am, not the self, right? And it's been incredible because there's been a separation. And now, instead of having just one agenda, I actually seem to have two agendas. There's the ego's agenda, which is there to defend me and promote me and make sure I look good and all like this. And yet then there's my heart's agenda, which is finding that it gets its agenda met through surrender. When I become defenseless, you know? I looked at it, I was with someone the other day on Saturday, and I had a bad morning. I had a business relationship for 14 years, and it came to an end. And there was a lot of grieving there, and there was a lot of anger, and I did a lot of resentment. I was sort of shook up because we had a sort of confrontation. Then my friend came over, and then basically we started having a confrontation away. And I just said, stop. I said, stop. I said, all I want is love. That's all. If you're willing to go for that, let's go with it. If you're not, then just drop me off at home. I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm just not into it. I don't want to protect another freaking idea I got. I don't want to protect you as a picture that means something really big to me. I don't want to do it. I'm going to give up right now. I surrender. That's all I want. And I know how to be in love. And to me it means to be defenseless. It means to be open up, to being surrendered, to give up my old ideas about what I need and how to protect myself and how to get it, and let God tell me what I need, and let God bring me what I will need, It's sort of like, here's your little book of life, and already 20 chapters have been written, but then I can just put down the pen and bring in a ghostwriter, you know what I mean, and say, God, you take over. And it's amazing. He'll sit down, and let's see, my story's been a pretty big melodrama, you know what I mean? With little prison chapters and little hospital chapters and stuff like that. But when given over to this higher power, it revises it and re-edits it. It makes it a whole different story than the one I was telling myself. It's like that thing, I said it on the tape you gave me. That thing that when I look back at my life, remembering that I give everything all the meaning it has for me, wherever I'm looking at it from. So if I'm looking at my life from my ego, the last few years of my living out there, I saw no value in whatsoever. There's none. All I had was guilt about it and shame, I lost all kind of humanness, and I was just like a rat. So I came in AA, and basically, if you could have bottled it up and put it in a package, I would have thrown it away. But the amazing thing is, when I came in AA, that thing that I was going to throw away, God planted, and it grew into something, grew into my recovery. And to me, that is really the principle of this program. That's a total principle. We talked about it the other day, and I still want to talk about it. That thing of, you go to meetings, I heard these people say, you know what, I'm going to have to change my definition of loss. Because what I thought was the worst thing that ever happened to me, I stay sober for a few years later, and I see was the greatest blessing. What do you think that is? That is an exact description of what's happening. Your egoic mind will give everything a meaning that it has, right? So if your egoic mind is to defeat you, then basically, when it looks back on anything that's happening to you, it will basically put a spin on it. To either make you feel bad, or that I'm the only one who screwed up, or whatever it may be. But somehow it's going to sort of confine you in your prison with that story. And then you take the same story and you turn it over to a higher power, and that higher power reinterprets it. It changes the meaning for you, because you now are looking at it, instead of from your ego, you're looking at it from this reliance on God or a higher power. And that will actually give a meaning to your life, a different one than the meaning you're giving to it now. And I'll tell you, I know for a fact this is true, because I've seen it in my own life, and I've been to enough meetings where I've seen it. It's almost like you surrendering your dictionary, your little Merriam-Webster, because you have definitions for everything. All the meaning everything has, you've given it to. You turn it over back to the editor, and he revises it. He gives all your definitions a whitewash, so to speak. He changes it. You get the real meaning of it. You get the real meaning of connection. You get the real meaning of intimacy. You get the real meaning of love. You get the real meaning of fellowship. You get the real meaning of surrender. You know? Because you're going to have meaning. You're going to do it. See, that apparatus, so to speak, is going to produce meaning. It's not like you have all these meanings that your ego's given, and then you're never going to have another meaning again when you surrender. No. You're going to have meanings just like you do now, but they're going to be revised and edited, and they're going to lead you to be more happy, joyous, and free, because that's its intention. Just like the ego has an intention to defeat you, the higher power, once led into your life, even if you don't believe it, has an intention for you to be happy, joyous, and free. And like a guy says in meetings, he says, God loves you just the way you are, but he loves you so much he won't let you stay that way. And that's really what it's about. You just surrender, you get on the operating table, and you don't get up until he tells you to. You'll go, is it over yet? Is it over yet? If you can just sit down, the work is unbelievable, the results. Unbelievable. Man, I'll tell you, I came in AA, I was very sickly, right, from my lifestyle. For about 11, 12 years, first 12 years of my sobriety, I was sick a lot. I had 3 major operations, but the last 4 or 5 years before 2 years ago, I was sick every week with sinus infections, respiratory problem, all this stuff. And it was a real freaking drag, telling the truth, being identified as a body. It was wearing me freaking out. It was affecting my relationships with women because I didn't have much tolerance. And you know what? I was getting to a point where I was really freaking frustrated at it. And you know what? The last 2 years, my health's the best it's ever been. So I just waited for the miracle to happen, trust this process, and it did. And I'll tell you, the gratitude I feel, even if it was removed tomorrow, the gratitude I feel for just being persistent and sticking with this, with what I believe to be true, which is the principle of a surrender, the results are unbelievable. They may not come on your timetable, but that doesn't matter, because when they come, you know they're not delivered by you, and so such a huge gratitude occurs. I mean, the transformation provided in this program is unbelievable to me. If you're willing just to stick with it a day at a time and just surrender. And to me, in a way, it demands more of you every year, right? It demands more of you, but it takes away more of you. And what you're left with is unbelievably beautiful because it's open. And then something can move through you, unimpeded, right? Because when I came in here, my little hose was all crimped up. There was absolutely no straight piece. You know what I mean? So whatever water of life was coming through me, it was like a little trickle or a drop when it finally came out. And all these years, it's been going, and so the water can just flow through, really. And that's the feeling I have of presence when I have it. It's just a moving through. It's not located, and its resonance isn't here. It's not like Paul. It's something moving through or coming this way or going out or whatever, but you feel it. It's almost like you're in dry water. You know what I mean? You can feel it almost like a current. There's a presence. And that presence is God to me. Or you want to call it whatever you want to call it, but it's there. And the only thing is, it's just like, it's right at your nose. You just don't see it. Because you're seeing something else. That's the only problem. You're thinking everything else is important, and you're missing the fact of the thing that's really important. It's sort of like you mistook your home, right, for a vehicle. You got into the vehicle, let's call it your awareness or your attention, right? And you're driving your attention to try to find what you're looking for, right? So you follow all these different paths, and you're driving around looking for it, using all the attention and awareness you got, and you don't realize that the awareness itself is it. The awareness itself. Not the awareness of anything. The ability to be aware that you have, the light is on, right? You're conscious, you're awake, that's it. That is it. Boom. You can feel it right now. You know? You stop, and it's there. You go, it's there. But see, you think you're gone. Right? You arrive, but you've never really left. You can't go anywhere other than where this is. That's why everything, it's like you getting in a home and trying to drive to find your home. You're driving your home to find your home in it. You know? It's a weird situation. But in fact, that's what's happening. So it's like St. Francis says, what you're looking for is what's looking. That awareness that's pouring out right now is what you're looking for. And if you would just stop, see, the equipment we have, the ability to cognize, the mind, cannot see something that isn't a something. Right? It recognizes objects. It recognizes thoughts as objects. It recognizes things. Spirit is not a thing. Spirit is everything. It can't be found. It's not out there. It's not like I'm going to find it. It's an object. No. That thing that's wanting to find it is it. So in a sense, if you just stop now, the journey's over. You'd be home. But the thing is, you just don't believe it to be home. You think home's got to be something. It's got to be something. And it ain't. It's not it. So all the years you do whatever you do, there's a book called A Course in Miracles, and one of the best chapters, I like this chapter a lot, called I Need Do Nothing. And it talks just about that. It says, no matter what you do, 20 years of contemplation, tons of this, tons of that, whatever it may be, the realization all those people will have sooner or later is that I need to do nothing. I need to do nothing. All I needed was to surrender. Truly. You know. Now they had to do everything to get to that point, but the fact is all they needed was to surrender. So, I don't know where I went with that one, but let's go back to fear. See, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? What's the big deal? You're going to be abandoned. No one's going to love you. You're going to get physically hurt. You're going to die. Right? Every fear is related to your body, right? You're identified as a body. You think you are the body, or you have a body. Right? If you really look at it, the identification with ego, usually the body goes along with that identification. All of that identification creates the whole mix of everything you're worried about. Everything you're worried about is based on being a body, pretty much so. You know? Now, can you know for sure that you are a body? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Or can you know for sure that you're an ego? It's changed a lot, hasn't it? Your idea of yourself when you were 5 is different than the one you have of yourself now. Right? If it's changed so much, how can it be real? Real means that it lasts, right? It stays the same. How can you be the ego? How can you be the body? But you live as if you are. You worry constantly about its security. When you go on vacation, you're really going on vacation for your body usually, or you think it is your body. I want to go somewhere warm. So what? So what's not going to be cold? Your body, right? You dress up, you buy a lot of clothes. Why? Because you want to get approval of others. Because you think they're a body. Right? So you're living your life basically as a body. And it's scary because the basic promise of being a body here is that you're going to get old, you're going to probably get sick, and you're definitely going to die. It's not a good deal, is it? Right? So let's say you come here and you think you're a body. You only have about 80 years, and every second you're going downhill. You know what I mean? You're getting closer to that dreaded goal of being a body, which is to die. That's not a pretty good idea to identify as a body, is it? Right? Doesn't make good sense, does it? Now, if you identify with your ego as you, can you find it? Can you find in your head or wherever you want to look, in your kneecap or your elbow, can you find where the ego is? Can you find its location there? But you're living for it. But you don't even know where it is. Have you ever thought of questioning that? Who is it that's worried about what you think next about me? Who is that worries about it? Does my heart worry about it? No. My idea of myself does. Because it means something to that. It means if I don't get your approval, that something's wrong with me. So I better get your approval. If I can't get your approval, I'll deny it and get angry at you. If I get angry enough, I'll probably drink over it or get loaded. Because I've given it all the meaning it has for me. My idea of wanting approval from women, I've given a different meaning than maybe you have. And you have, and everyone else has. We've all given all these different meanings to all these things. And that's the impact they have on us. Now, who takes the impact? Who is it so important to? Is it important to your body? No. Body is sort of neutral, doesn't have any opinion. Is it important to your heart? No. Who's it important to? My image of myself. Then who are you living for? My image of myself. Then can't you see that if you're living for the image of yourself, you're sort of open to the suffering that brings? So if your level of suffering is at a very high level, unfortunately you're very identified with your image and your body. You know what I mean? Let's say someone who's beautiful is identified with their body. They reap the rewards for that for maybe 5 or 6 years. And then they suffer unbelievably and get like 50 facelifts and everything else when they hit their 50s. So the thing that sort of what seemed to have brought them happiness and prestige is now the bane in their life. It didn't really last long, did it? The expiration date's always going to end up very quickly at your doorstep. It's not wise to identify with that, is it? So where is it that you can identify with? What else is there? You know, is there a spirit? Is there a heart? Is there something other than the ego and body? You better believe there is. Without it, there would be no body, and without it, there would be no ego. And yet we give it very little attention. And then yet we want to have all the effects it has. We want to be happy, joyous, and free, but we don't want to give up the identity we have as an ego or the body. And guess what? You can't do it. It's not going to work. Because the identification as the ego and the body is what's causing you to suffer. You cannot have the effects of what's causing you to suffer removed unless you get rid of the cause. You know what I mean? It's like very wishful thinking. Oh, I want to have a happy, joyous, free life, but I want to be identified with my body and my ego. Ooh, good luck. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to work. I mean, there's no other spin you can put on it. It's devastatingly simple. It will not work. So what about inventories? What is it about? And what about self-inquiry? It's just to investigate who you think you are, you know, and see if it's serving you. When I look at my life, I've lived in fear almost my whole life, all the time, every day. Every day, the constant companion. I maybe had a couple of dogs in my life, but nothing like the companion of fear. I've had fear every day, all day. You know what I mean? It ended up it walks me now. I don't walk it walks me. My whole life is based on trying to avoid it, in a sense, or trying to control it. What's the best way? The best thing I've discovered is stop that and surrender. And then do what the steps do. Do whatever you practice you have, but in it, please surrender. Give up the idea that you're going to do anything to change all this, because it's the you that is the root of it all. That ego is the root of it. All this, the dynamic we're in is based on the projector of it. Do you know what I mean? There's only one projector, and you have 8,000 images in the movie screen. It may be 20,000, but the light's only coming through one projector, producing the waterfall, the fire, the love affair, the da-da-da-da-da, right? But it's only one projector and only one light going through that. If you want another movie, change that projector. Put a different lens on it, right? Has a much wider aperture. And then when the light comes through that, when your projector has been surrendered, you has been surrendered, when that light, which is going to come through you no matter what, when it comes through you, the movie it's going to present will be different. It doesn't mean you'll get the greatest job, or it may mean you get the greatest job, but wherever you are, you'll start feeling there'll be some joy and happiness sprouting up here and there. There'll be some peace and serenity coming around. It won't be that barren desert filled with tons of stuff, but it's actually totally empty. You know? Actually, your life may look totally empty, yet it'll be filled. You know? People will say, oh, who's this? He's got nothing. And you'll have everything. Everything they bought, everything they have to get, you'll have. You know? It's incredible. So, to me, when I do these fear inventories, and we're going to bring some people up who want to do a resentment tonight, right? Yes. Yes, yes. This fear inventory, you have to realize all of them are rooted in your image of yourself and the meaning you've given everything from that image. That's what you're afraid of. You're afraid of the meanings everything has for you, really. You know? Like someone gets fired and you get fired. So one person laughs and says, oh, this is an opportunity to find something new. The other person's devastated. They went through the same experience. What's different? The meaning they gave it. That's all that happens. You know, it's not like there isn't a thing called being fired. It's only the meaning you give it. You know? Everything that happens, you don't even know what happened. All you know is the meaning you've given to what happened. It's so quick. It's so fast. You're responding to the meaning before you even see the thing. You never even get to see the real thing. You're constantly getting to see your meaning that you have of it. You know? You look in the mirror, you don't see you. You see your image of you. Right? You know what I mean? Most people who see you day in and day out think you look the same. Do you think you look the same every day? I don't think so, do you? I mean, you look at yourself at 9 in the morning, yeah, I look pretty good. 12, Jesus, I look freaking terrible. 4, I look pretty good. If you're working with someone, they think you're the same looking person the whole day. You know what I mean? I mean, what's real? Now, they're going through the same thing you're going through, but to you, they look the same. Because they're unimportant to you, and you're unimportant to them, really. They're obsessed with themselves, their image, and you're obsessed with your image. It's really that freaking simple. So when you see all these clues, they should indicate something to you. You know? And if it does indicate something to you, question that thing that's indicated. Question it. Can I know for sure that this is true? Can I know for sure that this is true? Whatever your weatherman or your advertising campaign is running in your head, when it's running, if you can catch it, ask yourself, can I know for sure that this is true? Just see. And you'll see that you can't. And the whole basis of the whole story is based on you believing it can, that this is the truth. That's like throwing a wrench in it, man. Throwing a wrench in it, and when your mind stops, you're free at that moment. Now, unfortunately, is you'll just pick up another script, you know? But if you can stop and appreciate what that feeling of stopped is, you're onto something then. You really are, you know? And to me, every time I've been stopped, there's been a surrender involved in it. That's the only thing I can put together with it. Every time I've really felt that onrush, and also, anytime you've ever had an epiphany, I'm sure you didn't do anything to bring it about. You didn't do anything. You know, you go on a 10-day meditation retreat, nothing happens, and one day you're cutting a piece of pig off of a whatever to make a sandwich, and whammo, your mind opens up. What's up? You know what I mean? I did all this stuff that's supposed to bring that about. It didn't. And now I'm cutting a piece of pig, and whammo, it wakes up. What's the deal? Get it. Has nothing to do with your doing. Has nothing to do with it. You're not going to do yourself into it. You're going to surrender, and maybe it'll happen, but you will not do yourself into it. You won't. It won't happen then. And if it did happen, it doesn't because you were doing what you thought you were doing to bring it about. It just happens. It just happens. And really, that's what life is, isn't it? It's just happening. We think, and that's all the problem is. We just think. We think we got a huge say in all the matters. You know what I mean? Jesus.